Warning, the following video contains violence towards children, such as self-inflicted abortion attempts, kidnapping, mental and physical abuse, murder and dismemberment, sexual acts on children including assault and human trafficking. Due to its violent nature, this episode is not intended for children. Viewer discretion is advised. Hey, welcome to Dark Mystery Podcast, where you get a little venom for your soul. I am your host, Vetty, and I have my guest coming for the third time. So go ahead and introduce yourself, guest.
I am Dawn, and I am Miss Avetti's best friend, and we are here to talk about true crime, and this is my cat being nosy.
Being all nosy and stuff. So real quick, this is part 3 of the Wineville chicken coop murders. So if you have not watched the first 2, please go back and watch that. There's so much information that we had to cut this case down into 3 parts. So please go check those out. If you have any questions or anything like that, comment below and we'll do our best to answer them. So let's continue on with this case. Now, Sanford's sister, Jessie, she came out of the blues to visit. You know, she was suspecting that there was something wrong for a while because keep in mind, Gordon would make Sanford write letters to the family. And this all was happening within a 2-year span. Now, the sister, she was getting these letters and whatnot, and she realized that, hey, if Sanford is supposed to be in school, why has his penmanship not improved? Because we all know throughout the years, if you're in school, you keep writing, your penmanship improves. And one thing that she also noticed is like, Sanford doesn't talk like that. Like he would write certain things, you know, and she's like, no, he doesn't talk like that. He's not, you know, like all proper and stuff and not, you know, like that's not him. So she knew something was off. Now at this time, she's 18 years old or 19 years old. I'm sorry. And she already had moved out of her house and she was trying to save up so she could just come and see what the heck is going on. So she ends up showing up to the house unannounced, basically, pretty much last minute. So once she got there, Gordon did a complete 180. He was totally different. He treated Sanford with like, oh my God, my nephew. Like he was just like, he acted like this awesome uncle. And he even started doing all the chores and he started prepping all the meals. And it got to the point where Sanford was even sleeping in a room. Because mind you, he did not have his own room. He slept on the couch or on the floor. So he just was acting completely different to put on a show for his niece, you know? And so he basically wanted to look like Uncle of the Year. Jessie, she wasn't convinced of all that. Like she saw through his BS. Like she knew like, hey, you're nah, you know? And the thing that kind of made it worse or like kind of convinced her was that Gordon would never leave them alone. Like she went to go visit her little brother, but Gordon was always there. They were not allowed to be in the same room or anything. Like he even took him out for like some sort of like Boy Scout, like camping trip or something. And he had booked some hotels or motels, I'm sorry, and they were not allowed to be in the same room, you know? But one night, Gordon, he had fell asleep and Sanford had snuck out to his sister and basically confessed everything to her. He even confessed to his sister, like, hey, I might be next, dude. Like, this is what's going on. And I might be next. And so the sister didn't know what to do. So she knew she had to be smart about this. So what she did is the next day she had bought a ticket, you know, according to the research, she bought a ticket and she went home. So she's like, okay, how can I do this? So she ended up calling the police here in California, and she made a claim that there was a Canadian immigrant boy working at a chicken ranch in Wineville illegally. So she was the one that made that phone call.
Okay, and so I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I didn't even know how they got caught up in the first place. But so once this happened, once they saw that the police was coming and everything, so Gordon told Sanford, you need to stall. If you don't, I'm going to kill you. So once the police got there and everything, Gordon did his best to stall. He stalled them for about 2 hours. And like the previous episode, he finally got the nerve to confess everything. That's how scared he was because he figured, well, he must be long gone by now. He told the police everything. Okay. Now, Gordon and his mother, they had fled back to Canada. And Sanford, he was still in the police station being interrogated. And you know how the police are, especially back in the day with LAPD. I'm sure they weren't being nice to this poor kid. So a higher up officer from the ones that were interrogating him, he came in and he saw how Sanford was being treated. And he's like, dude, look at this kid. He is not in a condition right now to be being questioned. Look at him. So he scolded the officers because they were mistreating him. So he basically was telling them, hey, you guys are more focused on the interrogation than this kid's well-being. So he forced him to take him to the hospital. Once he got there, they nurtured him. They wrote down all of his bruises and scars and just all his injuries. Mm-hmm. It was also discovered that he had permanent damage to certain areas of his body due to the sexual abuse. He was practically permanently disfigured in his rear end and probably his front end, but for sure the rear end. Once he was treated, the police began to question him, which that's how it should have been done. This is a 15-year-old boy that still looked like a 13-year-old boy because he was so malnourished and stuff. They asked him if he was willing to go back to the home in Wineville and show him where the graves were at. Once they got there, they unearthed the graves and they found only fragments of bones, not the actual bodies. They found fingers, they found hands and foot bones, they found toenails and particles of human flesh and hair. They also stated that there was an order of the decaying flesh in the graves. However, there was no bodies initially found. So they kind of questioned Sanford, hey, dude, what the hell? You told us that there were bodies and whatnot. And he's like, no, I know they are because I buried them myself. I did that, and it was only a few months, after the Winslow brothers. So they should still be in there.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't be any reason for the bodies to have been decomposed to that level because it's only been months. And they also did find other body parts or little fragments and stuff of it. So the police, they took samples of the bone fragments and it was discovered that the fragments had quicklime residue in it. Now, real quick, for those of you who do not know what quicklime is, it's a chemical compound that is known as a calcium oxide. It's normally used for steel making. It was believed that it could have been used to accelerate corpse decomposition, but it really helps to preserve the corpse and to get rid of the stench of decomposition, which clearly in this case, it did not work. Go ahead.
That's what John Wayne Gacy put down underneath his house, trying to get rid of the smell of the decay. Just a little, for those who didn't know.
I did not know that.
Now you know.
I didn't know that. And I know about all those, the famous cases and stuff. I did
10
not
years,
know that.
I got 29 years of true crime.
True.
I just aged myself, but
right. But it was clear that somebody had gone and they unearthed these graves after Sanford had dug them. So they placed quicklime there and then they discarded most of the body. Another thing they found was blood all over the chicken coop. So not only was this guy cocky and everything, but he was such an idiot that he left and I'm sorry to say that like that. I don't say that lightly, but this is how confident this guy was. He left blood everywhere in the chicken coop and thinking he's not going to get caught, There was also a bloody axe, which collaborated with Sanford's story. And when they tested the blood, it was discovered they had two types of blood, which was chicken and human. So not only did this guy use this axe to kill chickens, he used it to, to kill the boys and everything like that. And then they also discovered certain items of the victims, but the bodies were never found. They couldn't really say that they were in fact murdered because they never found the bodies. Now, Gordon and his mother, they were found in Canada and they were arrested. They were getting ready to be brought back to the U.S. So while waiting, both Gordon and Louise had confessed to the crimes. But the thing is, Louise, she had confessed to killing Walter Collins, and Gordon had confessed to murdering more than 5 boys. However, this was never proven. And his actual victim count remains unknown to this day. For certainly what we're saying is we are not 100% sure what the victim count is. But according to court documents, it was a total of 4 victims. Once they were back in the U.S., they recanted their confessions. And since they weren't officially confessions in the first place, they couldn't be used against him. So they were maintaining their innocence. So now let's talk about the trial. So Dawn, you want to go ahead and take over that one?
Yeah, let's get into the trial. So Gordon was so full of himself and extremely cocky and narcissistic. He met up with a few lawyers, but he thought he was smarter than them, mind you. Smarter than a lawyer. He truly thought he could win the case, so he decided to represent himself. He had made a motion to change his plea of not guilty to not guilty by a reason of insanity. It was denied. He had no proof he was insane. He had never been treated for it. There was no doctor's reports that led to it. And even if he wanted to get a doctor's evaluation, a psych eval, they said no. You obviously were of your sound mind. I mean, there's some amount of mental instability there, but that
Not to that point.
I think that's where nature versus nurture comes in, right? Like it's
Yes.
not natural that he was deemed, something being off. It was nurture. He was raised in that type of environment, and he kind of let loose what his anger and his feelings in ways that were illegal. So
Exactly.
he ended up being found guilty for 3 of the 4 counts of murder and was given the max penalty. 3 of the 4 because he could not be found guilty for Walter Collins's murder, only because his mom took the blame for that. That's why he was not found guilty of that one, and they could not find evidence to stick on him. And in a case, kind of evidence doesn't exist. You have to have hard evidence or none. Just it's not going to work. So because of the 3 of the 4 murders, he was given the max penalty. Max penalty was death by hanging. Honestly, I don't wish harsh outcomes to anyone or death upon anyone, but that was too easy for him. His death was too easy. He got away with it.
Agree.
I feel like what he did to those little boys, he deserved a harsher penalty. Louise was sent to trial as well. There she reconfessed to the murder of Walter Collins. She was considered for the death penalty, but because she was a woman, they gave her life in prison. Because, women can't do vicious crimes like men. That's bullshit. Eileen Wuornos.
Yeah, Hello. That's exactly who I was thinking about right now. Exactly who I was thinking about.
They haven't seen Chicago, have they? I mean,
just saying.
Women can be just as mean, okay? She only served 14 years of her sentence. However, she passed away 2 years later. She got off easy too.
She did. She really did.
Yeah. It took 2 years to get an execution date for Gordon. So now we have the aftermath. So this is after all is said and done. The execution, the mom's death. Christine tried to move on with her life and start new, but she couldn't. Like, that's her baby. She never knew, because Gordon told her that he was still alive, that he never killed him. Like, they weren't sure that was him. So she, in her mind, believed her son could still be out there. Her son could have just, strayed away from home, or somebody maybe picked up her son and gave her son a life because they didn't, have children. And back then you could do that. Oh, you don't have a mom? Oh, I'll be your mom. So because Gordon loved to psychologically torture people, he psychologically tortured Christine the rest of her life. So the aftermath. While Gordon awaited his execution, this is when he wrote to Christine and told her to come visit him. This was part of his psychological terror. He terrorized her. He wanted to tell her everything about Walter. When she did go see him, he stayed silent and told her nothing. He wouldn't even make eye contact with her. Nothing. The day of his execution, his final request was for a phonograph to play a favorite song of his first victim, Philip, which we talked about. He would listen to that song.
Yep. That, remember I mentioned in the first part, I say keep that in mind, that he even remembered Philip's favorite song because he wanted it played, which in my opinion, he shouldn't have even got that.
No.
Like, no. Torture this guy as much as you possibly can.
Yep.
You know?
And he went on to ask the prison guard, will it hurt? The guard pretty much told him he doesn't know. How are you
going to know?
Supposed to know if it hurts to be hung? I mean, unless you've been hung or tried to hang yourself. You don't know these things. Then Gordon requested to be blindfolded because he didn't want to see the noose. He was hanged.
Oh, boo-hoo. I'm sorry. Boo-hoo. Boo-hoo.
You see? Yeah. He was hanged October 2nd, 1930. There are speculations about his last words. Some people say he mumbled, "Don't hang me, don't hang me." Other claims state he said, "Please don't make me walk so fast." Also, that he had asked people to pray for him at the time of his execution. The rope was too loose to break his neck. It took a total of 13 minutes for Gordon to die. So basically when they dropped him, the noose, it didn't snap his neck. Like, it's supposed to snap your neck and be almost instant. So he did get some torture, which still wasn't enough.
Exactly.
Sanford Clark was returned to Canada, where he remained for the rest of his life. He met a woman named June McInnes and married her in 1935. During World War II, he enrolled into the Royal Military and served honorably. When he returned, him and his wife adopted 2 sons. He did not want to
reproduce,
procreate from his own lineage because he knew his whole family was so fucked in the head that he did not want to risk another episode of Gordon and Louise and that whole thing. He didn't want that to happen again. So he adopted 2 children, boys, and it was said that he pushed adoption over the uncle sickness. That's why. One night on a long car ride, he had told the story to his eldest son, Jerry. Jerry wrote down his father's story, which we'll get more into about
we'll
the
get
chicken
into
coop.
that, yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Sanford did not live to see it published. He actually passed away on June 21st, 1991, and he was 78 years old. The book Jerry Clark published is called The Road Out of Hell. Sanford Clark was the last known survivor of his uncle and the only one that made it out alive. However, allegedly. However, with the lack of evidence, we'll never know exactly how many victims Gordon Northcott really had and what exactly happened to Walter Collins. Now, in 1935, there was a boy and his parent that came forward claiming that 6 years prior, the boy had gone missing and he was assumed to be one of Northcott's victims. According to Sanford's deposition, beside himself, there was no one that had actually escaped the ranch. But this could have been before Sanford came out, because this boy supposedly escaped and took a train all the way up to either Hesperia or Hemet. I'm not quite sure. I always get those 2 towns confused because they're H's.
I think it was Hesperia.
Was it Hesperia?
I think it was Hesperia.
Okay. So he came up to Hesperia, and for a year or 2, he didn't want to come home because he was afraid of what would happen to him. And finally, after he was dead, he felt comfortable to come out and tell his story. The boy wasn't going to be killed by Gordon anymore.
Yeah, because by this time he already knew that Gordon Northcock was in fact executed and stuff, and his mother was in jail, but still he was afraid.
Yeah,
who could blame him,
That's a horrible ordeal to have to go through at such a young age. I mean, in the movie, I believe they named him Davy, but neither myself nor Vetty could find any information about this boy, if it was real, if it happened, if it didn't happen. And we scoured everything but the dark web. So if you know more, please post below. Let us know. Send her a message. let her know.
Or if you wanted more private, you could always email me at darkmysterypodcast.com with that information if you just so happen to know. Like the movie itself, it's just horrifying. It doesn't even come close to what actually happened. I personally cannot watch that movie again. I watched it once and I cannot watch it again, especially because of that scene. But everything that Christine Collins had gone through, it's so heartbreaking. And in that particular scene where they put the boys in the chicken coop and there's like a bunch of boys in there already, and then he grabs another one and then he takes him to the other side of the chicken coop, which is kind of blocked off by a wall, but there was light in there and it wasn't fully closed, so you can see what's going on by the shadows. And he just starts like,
yeah,
he just starts going crazy on him. And you could see in the shadow what's happening, just the screams and everything. It's heartbreaking and this is a movie, mind you. This is not even what actually, I mean, that, you know what I mean? So imagine, like, I cannot imagine what these boys had gone through. And then with the book, A Road Out of Hell, I'm not finished with the book right now, but I'm almost finished with it. And it's just basically the moment Sanford got in the car with Gordon when he was coming to California, he was being abused physically. Now, according to the book, Gordon had showed up to Canada to take Sanford to go help him build the home. So this is before the ranch was even made. It was already bought, but it was not made yet, like the homes and stuff. So Gordon convinced his mom to let Sanford go with him. His mom, or Gordon's sister, if you will, Louisa, she was just a horrible human being. And I'm going to say that because it's the fucking truth. How could you allow your son to go with your uncle? And I get it. You want him to grow up, but she was like mentally abusive. She was those type of women that will put a man down. Like she was just a horrible, horrible person, And then don't get me started on Gordon's mother. She was just as bad. Now, there was reports that supposedly, I don't know who said it, but it was supposed, or it was alleged, that Gordon's father sexually abused him as a child. And I'm going to call bullshit on that, because the mom would not allow him to be alone because she was so on top. Like she was just on him. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a mother who abused him.
So. I think
it
the
probably
mother
was.
did it.
Because she was a crazy ass woman too. And with the whole, supposedly the dad was abusive. I'm also going to call bullshit on that, because according to the book, this is Sanford's point of view, mind you. She was the verbal abuser right there. She was just this like, heartless woman, and she hated Sanford. And when they got back here to California, they had to stay at Gordon's parents' home. This is Sanford's grandparents, and she hated him and she belittled him. And pretty much that same night, he was already starting to be sexually abused. In the book, it details, and please pardon me for this, but I just have to share this. It details how Gordon was basically touching Sanford and making him ejaculate and all that. And, Gordon he didn't like this, he was doing this to him and whatnot. And then Sanford said that his grandmother told him, hey, my son is a pianist and he needs to have his hands like so nice and pretty. So you need to do all the work. If my son even lifts up one little finger for that, I'm going to beat your ass. I'm paraphrasing what she said, but basically he was forced to do all the labor work. So once they got there, they started building the home. Gordon's father was there as well to help. And then he left. And that's when the abuse started getting worse. He started using like foreign objects on Sanford. Let's just put it this way. He was exposed to sharp objects and he was bleeding for weeks. He had permanent damage and he was permanently disfigured from this. And if you look at his pictures, you can see like little scars and stuff. And what really breaks my heart is that Sanford is saying that as he's doing his work, Gordon would bring boys, Mexican boys. That's how the book actually says it, would bring Mexican boys and put them in the chicken coop and torture them. The first boy that he can remember, he said that like he would always try to stay away from that because he was relieved that it wasn't him, but he felt so guilty that he couldn't help him because he was so afraid. So he would try to avoid that. Now, Gordon knew this, and he would force him, like, here, go get him some food, go do this. He would force him at that area. So he said that when he went over there, the boy was scared, and then he realized, hey, it's not Gordon, it's this kid. And he was kind of like implying like, hey, you, me, like saying like, we're in this together. And he said that he didn't know what he was saying, but his message was, let's get out of here. Why can't we leave? You know, then these boys started disappearing. Like he would have them for like a week or so, and then they would disappear. He never knew what happened to these Mexican boys, but Gordon always told Sanford, if you will, I know how to get rid of a body. I know how to do this. He was just so full of himself. Like he thought he knew it all.
Arrogance.
Like this guy, very arrogant, very like, honestly, he would not survive nowadays because he would have been like, we would have slapped the shit out of him. Honestly, he would have been someone's bitch in prison if he would have been there, you know, but nowadays, I mean, but what gets me is that when he, according to the book, Gordon had brought Walter Collins, and Sanford had no idea who this kid was, but Gordon told Sanford, yeah, we know each other. I know his mom. I worked at the grocery store not far from where he lives. And Sanford's like, dude, how are you going to bring someone you know? Like, are you crazy? Like, what the hell? What's going on? So he ended up putting him in the chicken coop and torturing him. And he said that his screams were so loud that he would try to muzzle his, like he didn't want to hear it and whatnot. And then, you know, that everything happened with Walter Collins. And so when the boys came, you know, Sanford was very like, hey, this isn't right. Mind you, he would have contact with these boys because he would have to feed them. And Gordon would force Sanford to wash them because they needed to be clean. He wanted them to be perfect. So Sanford, the best that he can do was say, hey, like, just go with it. That's the best thing that you can do. Like, he didn't know what to, he was so afraid of this man, which I don't blame him. So what breaks my heart in this book thus far, because I have not finished the book, is that towards the end, when he had the Winslow brothers, according to the book, they were like in the same chicken coop or something like that. So Gordon told Sanford, hey, go get Lewis, the eldest, go get him. Don't wake up the other one. Tell him that he needs to convince me that, you know, he's not going to say anything and that I will let him go. I'll take them home. Mind you, this is in the 1920s. Back then, things that happened like that was very frowned upon. So if you were a victim of rape, especially a male victim of rape, they wouldn't look at you as a victim. They'll look at you like, ugh, what's wrong with you? You know what I mean? So it was embarrassing. So of course, Sanford and then they didn't want no one to know. So he was excited. Sanford himself was excited at this news. So he goes and he wakes up Lewis and he tells him, hey, don't wake up your brother. But my uncle wants to know, like, you need to convince him why he should let you go. You guys could even go home today. And they were so happy. They were so excited and everything. And so he describes that Lewis, you know, he unchains Lewis. He comes out of the chicken coop. Now, I don't know if this was in the chicken coop or in the home where it happened. I'm assuming the home, but I don't know. But as soon as Lewis walks out or walks into wherever he was going, where Gordon was at, Gordon took the axe and struck them in the head. Sanford started screaming, but Gordon shut him down and basically told him, like, do not wake up the brother. So like, he was like, what the hell? You promised you were going to let them go. And he was like, well, you know, whatever. Like, that was his attitude. Like, he was just like, well, whatever, you know, I don't care. So then he forced Sanford to go get Nelson, the little brother, and basically did the same thing to them. And yes, they were still alive when this happened. And it is just so heartbreaking. And then when Sanford asked Gordon about the boys in the beginning, the Mexican boys, because there were several, he said there was like at least 20. He's like, what happened to them? Gordon will be like, oh, well, you know, I know things. I know certain ways. I know how to get rid of people. He never knew about any like human trafficking or anything. So that was all reported by the police and the media and stuff. So we can assume that that is what happened, because I believe Gordon actually did confess to that, you know, and he just loved to taunt Sanford and everyone around. He was such a narcissist that, like, just the level of his insanity is like, he's just so evil. I cannot comprehend how this is not a fictional story. You know what I mean? It's like, it's hard for me to believe that this really happened. Now, I will say this. After all this happened, Wineville had changed the name to Miraloma because this was so bad, especially for the 1920s, that they just did not want to be associated with that. So they changed it. The chicken coop themselves were torn down, but the house to this day still stands. I will post at the end of this video a little trick that I made where you can see the home. And yes, people do live in that home. I think I saw an interview and one of the residents there, she said that she didn't know about all this stuff. She's never witnessed anything like ghosts or paranormal, anything like that. Yeah. And when I went to go visit, honestly, like, it gave me chills. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I was recording, so I was seeing it through my phone, but then when I see the actual house, it gave me chills. Like, it just, because it's the actual home. No, worse than that. Like, it just, I felt so sick to my stomach, knowing that all that happened and that home is still there. You know what I mean?
House should have been torn down because the house is in the exact same state. Nothing has been remodeled from looking out to in. I have seen pictures. I'm one of those people that when I watch something, I investigate what I'm watching and I find out who the cast is, who that person was in real life. And I'm that person. That's me. And the house, the windows are the same. The door placement's the same. The outside is the same. Maybe it's been painted, but everything about the house is the same. And just looking from the outside in, it looks creepy. Like there's a bunch of plants around it in the picture I saw.
Well, there's trees now. Like it's blocked by trees. So you have to kind of drive by to see the home. So they were smart because a lot of people, they do go and they want to see the home, the chicken coop murder home, and it's just so creepy. Now, obviously the house was updated with in regards to wiring and things like that. But just knowing that happened there, it gave me such chills. Like, oh my God, it's just horrible.
That's like, for me, I have visited graves of famous people. I think that's awesome. As Betty knows, I've been into Doc Holliday's grave and Marilyn Monroe's, Dean Martin's, you name it. I may have seen it, but I had made a stop coming back from when I lived in Michigan, going to the Villisca axe murder house. If you guys don't know about that,
we will cover it.
that stuff, that house, just standing outside of it, it was closed due to the season, but standing outside of it, it felt like someone was watching and following me, like, as I would take a look. The original outhouse is there, and like me being nosy because we have indoor plumbing, I went to see what an outhouse looked like. So it felt like I honestly thought someone was gonna go boo when I looked into the little moon thing. Like, you could feel houses that have such horrific stories feel like the house is watching you.
Yeah.
So I couldn't imagine what you felt. I can understand because of me going to the Villisca axe murder house, but I can't imagine what you felt where these children were ripped from life.
It was, it felt, the atmosphere felt so heavy. I couldn't take it. I didn't stay long. And I want to be respectful to the residents of the home. You know what I mean? It's like, imagine living in a home, like a famous home, and people are just constant, and I did feel bad. Don't get me wrong. So, but I will post that at the end of this video. So, but that is it for this episode. Thank you guys for joining us. So please, once again, like and follow. Tell us what you think of this. Do you feel that Gordon Northcott got what he deserved? Do you feel that he should have been tortured more or whatnot? Let us know in the comment below. Also, don't forget to share, like, and follow. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Dark Mysteries Podcast. For Twitter, it is Venom for the Soul. And if you have any requests of what you want to see in the next episode, or if you, just want to be a guest or something,
put it down below.
Put it down below, or send me an email at darkmysterypodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to also check out Don's Twitch. Go ahead and put that info out there.
Twitch.com/Dunderballs with the Z. That's DUNDERBALLZ. Sorry. I will be discovering the world of Warcraft. I also do Diablo, Gotham Knights, some PS5 games, and I will eventually, I'm hoping, do some true crime, and we will have Miss Betty as a guest on Dunderball's
Woohoo! Of
channel.
course, of course. I will definitely link that below. So go ahead and check it out, like and follow. So that's it for us. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please go check out part 1 and part 2 of this case, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, Vetty here. So I just wanted to come on real quick and just give you some more details about the book A Road Out of Hell. Now that all 3 parts of Wineville Chicken Coop Murder episode is finished, there were some parts that were different from the research that I had done within the case. So according to the book, which keep in mind, this book was told by Sanford Clark's son, Jerry Clark, who he told him when he was about 17, and he kind of hesitated to tell him, but there was a reason why he told him. But a couple of things that I want to bring up. Well, according to the book, when Gordon Northcock went to Canada to convince his sister to allow him to bring his nephew Sanford down to help him, it was before he bought the land in Wineville, California. Sanford Clark did not want to go, and he did everything in his power to try to convince his parents not to. According to Sanford Clark's book, his mother was a type of like mentally abusive type of woman, just kind of like her mother, who it was like my way or the highway, and they both belittled their husbands, and it was all about me, that they had that type of mentality, and they would really just put their husbands down and just treated them like shit, basically. Sanford even tried to have his sister convince their mother so that way, he won't go. But the mom's like, no, you're a little shit. You have to go anyway. So he ended up leaving with Gordon. And almost immediately, as soon as he got in the car, Gordon Norcock started abusing him physically. But it was more of a teasing type, like a bullying, like I'm going to hit you type, like just bullying. And then once they crossed the border, it started getting a little more intense. When they got to LA, Gordon's mother was very happy to see him, but when she saw Sanford, she just hated him and immediately started like just fucking with him, Because of that, Gordon ended up hitting him. Now, according to the book, they lived in LA for a little bit because they were still waiting for the whole escrow thing going on with the land in Wineville. But when they were living there, Sanford had claimed that Gordon was starting to touch him and do things to him, even goes as far as saying that he had his mouth on him, things like that. So then Sanford did not want to be there. He wanted to go home, but he obviously couldn't. So finally they bought the ranch and they started building everything, and it was Gordon and Sanford and Gordon's father. Gordon was just very arrogant and stuff, and he just basically started abusing him immediately, sexually and physically and mentally, and pretty much breaking him down. So after all that, Gordon would bring what Sanford would describe as Mexican boys. He would still abuse Sanford, but his main focus was on the boys. When Sanford would ask Gordon what became of these boys, he would just kind of hint like, well, I know how to get rid of a body type thing. And it really did scare Sanford, but it never was proven or nothing. It is highly speculated, though, that those were the boys that Gordon did use for sex trafficking, because that is something that he did, in fact, do. Another thing that was brought up, Gordon Northcock did know Walter Collins and Christine Collins. He used to work at a grocery store in LA, and that's how he knew the family. So we could assume that Walter went with Gordon because he didn't know him. But Sanford was not in the car. And according to the book, Sanford did not ride with Gordon to pick up any of these boys. He felt really awful because he can hear him screaming all night because he was in pain and things like that. And he couldn't help him. He was so afraid. And Sanford does also mention how part of the abuse that his uncle inflicted in him, he would use wooden branches to basically assault him, and it would leave splinters and things like that, which actually caused his deformity in his anus, unfortunately. That's part of what he would use. He doesn't really go into more details on what else he used, and we could only assume that he also used that on his victims. Then when it came to the Winslow boys, what really broke my heart was that he kind of not really befriended them, but he got familiar with the boys. He really wanted to help them, but he just didn't know how. And the mother already knew about the killings of the headless Mexican boy, so he just knew that he was doomed either way. If they're gonna kill that boy, why wouldn't they kill me type mentality. And it's just very heartbreaking because Sanford actually did believe in his heart that they were going to be let go. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Now, after Gordon's arrest and everything, when they took Sanford for interrogation, he was, in fact, in a juvenile prison. And this detective went to talk to him. And that's when he realized, hey, this boy has not been taken care of, because at this time that he didn't know what had happened to Sanford. But when Sanford opened up to him and told him everything that happened, he immediately took him to go get medical help. He was able to get the help that he needed. So after that, Sanford, he felt like he really couldn't trust anybody, and he wasn't really sure if he could trust this detective. And I completely forgot his name, but the detective told him, like, hey, I can help you, but you need to do this. Can you testify against your uncle? Which he did, ended up testifying against his uncle. And so did his sister, Jessie, ended up testifying. One little side note as well that I want to mention, because I'm sure a lot of you thinking like, well, what did Sanford's mom think about this? Let me tell you what she did. When Gordon and his mother ended up going back to Canada, she helped them hide. She actually was aiding them to get away with this. She didn't give two craps about her son. She didn't believe what was going on with her son. She actually helped them. So to me, that just proves what kind of people they are. It kind of proves Sanford's point about not wanting generational curses to continue on and ending his bloodline. That's why he adopted the two boys, because he did not want whatever illness or sickness that was going on with their family to continue on the new generations and stuff. But once Sanford was able to testify, he said that he felt really good because his uncle was trying to manipulate him, but he did it because he knew he was safe. And so he ended up going to Whittier at this like juvenile home where he ended up getting the help that he needed and everything, and he served his time. They were going to send him back to Canada, and the detective walked them to the shipping area where he was going to go from LA to Seattle by ship and then take the bus home to Canada. So the detective basically made Sanford promise that he's going to do right, he's going to live a better life, and he's going to redeem himself, and it's okay that he feels guilty, but it wasn't his fault. And I will note that in the book, Sanford does say that he did feel guilty for the rest of his life, and he was afraid to get back into public because some people did know about Sanford Clark, but thankfully nobody ever accused him or rubbed it in his face or anything like that. And then he met his wife, who they were madly in love, and she knew about the past, and she didn't care because she knew that he was a victim of what happened. So the reason why he ended up telling his son Jerry Clark about his past was because where they were living at, there was a murder that had happened. I can't remember the details. I just remember there was a murder. So Sanford was afraid that they were going to put the blame on him because of his past with his uncle. So he wanted to prepare his son in case it did happen. And he was very hesitant about it. He didn't even want to tell his younger son, but he figured if I tell my eldest, it'll be easier for me to tell my youngest when the time comes, if he finds it necessary. So that is why he told his son what happened. And of course, they were both very shocked. His wife knew that, Sanford did tell Jerry what happened. And in the book, it says that when they both came in the home, they were both very quiet. They didn't say anything. And Jerry ended up going to his room. Yeah, I believe he cried himself to sleep and whatnot. So, but Sanford did end up living a long, fulfilling life. He died in the 1990s. I believe the early 1990s. I feel that he did in fact redeemed himself, and I don't feel that he had anything to be blamed for because he was just a child who was in fact abused and tortured mentally, physically, and emotionally by his demonic, mentally deranged uncle, who got far less than he deserved because he just deserved the worst. So we are going to pass by the actual home of the Wineville chicken coop murders, which still stands. So this is the home of Gordon Stewart Norcock. I don't know if you guys can see it, but that is the home where all that happened. That back there is where the chicken coops used to be at and where the murders happened. They were actually pretty smart. They put trees up there and everything for idiots like myself, over here trying to get a glimpse of the actual home. But it's entirely crazy how it's still up there and it's still, in place and whatnot. So I just wanted to come in here and share that information with you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in for this 3-part episode. And like I said before, I know some people are gonna be like, oh, it's not as bad as you're making it seem. I understand that. But to me, that is horrible because it does involve children and it does involve torturing of them. But thank you guys so much for, sticking through it and everything. As you do know, we are going to stop for a little bit because I am going to rebrand. I will be changing the name, and I'm sure you guys saw the video already. So I will be changing the name and kind of rebranding everything. So thank you for your patience. Like and subscribe. Make sure to share and follow. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram as well. So you can hear this on YouTube and on Spotify and Anchor. Thank you guys for everything. I love you very much. Bye.